She was humiliated for being overweight, left alone with her belongings scattered on the sidewalk. When a mysterious millionaire noticed her talent, everyone thought it was just pity. But as their worlds collided, secrets were revealed and hearts were transformed in ways no one could have imagined. A story about finding worth when the world says you have none. Prepare yourself, because this journey will touch your soul and remind you that true beauty has nothing to do with size. Subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and comment where you're watching from. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Millfield's village square as the locals began their journey home. The scent of fresh bread still lingered in the air when Olivia Harper found herself alone on the sidewalk. Her suitcase lay open, clothes scattered across the ground, and the muffled laughter of three women faded as they walked away without looking back. Their words still echoed painfully in her mind. "You'll never fit in this world." It wasn't the first time she'd heard such cruel remarks, but this time it hurt more deeply, because she had believed, because she had dared to dream. During the first months of the year, life had seemed on the verge of change. Olivia was a woman with generous curves, gentle eyes, and strong hands known for making the best sweet potato bread at the local farmer's market. People rarely admired her for her appearance, but they respected her kindness and resilience. When her church friend Martha showed her an advertisement for a luxury retreat house looking for staff for the summer season, Olivia saw a chance to start fresh. The retreat's manager had accepted her references, praised her talents, and invited her to spend the season at Evergreen Hill, where wealthy, demanding guests came from far and wide seeking peace, nature, and impeccable service. Olivia had prepared meticulously. She had sewn dresses with floral fabrics, learned to prepare new calming teas, and studied books on etiquette. But upon arrival, she was greeted with sideways glances. The house coordinator, Elizabeth Winters, a woman as thin as a dried cornstalk, didn't even pretend to be kind. The uniform might not fit you, and the staff quarters are rather small. From the first day, Olivia was isolated from the others, assigned hidden tasks, kept far from the guests' sight. The weeks passed in a blur of heavy dishes, wet laundry, and linens to iron. Olivia never complained. She sang softly to herself, her steady hands mixing herbs, spices, and comfort. The tea she prepared for the other staff members soon became routine. The kitchen became her sanctuary, a place where her size didn't matter as much as her skill. "Your bread has a secret ingredient," Mrs. Reynolds, the elderly cook, said one morning as she watched Olivia knead dough with practiced movements. "I've been baking for 40 years, and I can't figure out what makes yours special." Olivia smiled, her cheeks flushing slightly. "My grandmother always said good bread needs time and love. Nothing more." She didn't mention how baking had saved her during her darkest days, how the rhythm of kneading had steadied her breathing when panic threatened to overwhelm her. "Well, you've got plenty of both," Mrs. Reynolds replied, patting Olivia's shoulder before shuffling away to attend to the breakfast service. These small moments of kindness kept Olivia going, even as she noticed how differently the other staff members were treated. The slender, pretty women worked in the front areas, greeting guests with practiced smiles, while Olivia remained hidden away in back rooms and service corridors. One rainy Tuesday, Elizabeth cornered Olivia in the linen closet. "When you walk through the main hall, please use the service entrance. Mr. Caldwell is bringing his business associates this weekend, and we need to maintain a certain image." Her eyes traveled over Olivia's figure with undisguised distaste. Olivia nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "Of course." The words tasted bitter, but she needed this job. The small apartment she'd left behind had eaten through her savings, and she had nowhere else to go. That night, alone in her narrow bed, Olivia considered leaving. She could return to her hometown, face the pitying glances, maybe reopen her small bakery stand at the weekend market. But something kept her at Evergreen Hill. Perhaps pride, perhaps hope, or simply the lack of better options. The following week brought a new guest. A solitary, unassuming man with an air of someone who had seen the world and carried more silence than vanity. He helped arrange the fireplace logs and greeted staff members with disconcerting sincerity. Unlike the other wealthy visitors who barely acknowledged service staff, this man, Mr. Alexander Bennett, according to the guest book, made eye contact when saying thank you. At first, Olivia only saw him from a distance, collecting his cup after breakfast, or refreshing the flowers in the common areas. But he began to notice details. The artisanal bread at breakfast, the cinnamon scent in the hallways, the delicate embroidery on the guest towels. And he started asking who was responsible for these touches. Who makes the bread? Olivia overheard him asking Mrs. Reynolds one morning. It reminds me of my grandmother's. That would be Olivia's doing, Mrs. Reynolds replied, a note of pride in her voice. The girl has magic in her hands. Olivia ducked behind the pantry door, not wanting to be seen. But later that day, while gathering mint near the kitchen garden, she felt someone's presence. Looking up, she found herself face to face with Mr. Bennet. He didn't approach her with flirtation, but with genuine curiosity. How did you learn to attend to everything with such care? His voice was deep but gentle. His eyes, a striking shade of gray, looking directly at her without judgment. Olivia stepped back, clutching her basket of herbs. My grandmother taught me, she answered softly, then added, I should get back to the kitchen. She hurried away, heart pounding. Men like Alexander Bennet didn't notice women like her. Not in that way. Experience had taught her that lesson painfully well. If he was being kind, it was likely pity, or perhaps just his nature. Nothing more. But he returned, day after day. He asked questions about her herb mixtures, told stories of his travels, and listened attentively to her brief responses. Olivia remained guarded, answering politely but briefly, always finding a reason to return to her duties. One day, she found a book on the kitchen counter. Inside was a note. For someone who knows how to make the world smell like childhood. The book was a collection of traditional recipes from around the world. Olivia held it carefully, as if it might disappear, before tucking it under her apron and hurrying to her room. That night, she stayed up reading, fingers tracing the colorful photographs of foods she'd never seen. The note remained on her bedside table, the first gift she'd received in years. The world around her, however, did not remain silent. Rebecca, a waitress who had previously ignored Olivia, suddenly began to imitate her, copying recipes and wearing similar scarves in her hair. Elizabeth, noticing the growing connection between Olivia and Mr. Bennet, decided to transfer her to another section, the back shed where greasy rags were washed and there were no windows. It was there, amidst steam and soap, that Olivia cried for the first time since arriving at Evergreen Hill. The darkness of the shed reminded her of childhood closets, where she had hidden from taunts and laughter. The familiar feeling of being punished for simply existing washed over her. This is what happens, she whispered to herself, scrubbing a stained tablecloth with more force than necessary. This is what always happens when you forget your place. She didn't hear the door open, didn't notice Alexander until he spoke. They told me you asked to leave the morning shift. His voice was tight with controlled anger. Olivia looked up, mortified at being caught crying. She quickly wiped her face with her sleeve. No, She stopped, not wanting to cause trouble. It's fine. I don't mind working here. Alexander's eyes narrowed as he took in the dim space, the piles of dirty linens, the single bulb casting harsh shadows. This isn't right, Olivia. It was the first time he'd used her name, and something in his tone made her heart skip. But experience had taught her caution. Please, Mr. Bennet. I need this job. He studied her for a long moment before nodding once. I understand. But this isn't over. The next day, rumors spread through the retreat house like wildfire. Alexander Bennet had gone to the management office. No one knew exactly what was said, but Elizabeth emerged looking shaken, her typically perfect composure cracked. By lunchtime, Olivia was called to the office. Her hands trembled as she wiped them on her apron. This was it. She was being fired. She'd have to pack her few belongings and leave, with nowhere to go, and barely enough savings for a week's rent. Instead, she found Alexander waiting alongside the retreat's owner, Mr. Whitmore, a man she'd glimpsed only from afar. Miss Harper, Mr. Whitmore began, his tone businesslike but not unkind. Mr. Bennet has made an interesting proposition, and I believe you should hear it. Alexander stepped forward, hands clasped behind his back. I recently acquired an abandoned mansion in Pine Valley. I intend to transform it into a boutique inn with character, and I'd like you to manage it. Olivia blinked, certain she had misheard. Manage? I don't have experience with... You have exactly the experience needed, Alexander interrupted gently. You understand hospitality in ways that can't be taught. You see details others miss. You create comfort where others see only tasks to complete. Mr. Whitmore cleared his throat. It's an unusual arrangement, but Mr. Bennet has assured me you'll be well compensated, with proper contracts and benefits. He's asked to release you from your commitment here, which I'm willing to do. Olivia's mind spun. This couldn't be real. Men like Alexander Bennett didn't offer partnerships to women like her. Why? She managed to ask. Why me? Alexander's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Because in 3 weeks, you've made Evergreen feel more like a home than my own house has in years. That's a rare talent, Miss Harper. I need time to think, she stammered, overwhelmed by the unexpected turn of events. Of course. Alexander handed her an envelope. My contact information and the details of the offer. Take a week to decide. That night, Olivia barely slept. She read the proposal a dozen times, searching for hidden catches or cruel jokes. The salary offered was more than she'd ever earned. The position described with respect and clear expectations. It seemed genuine, yet years of disappointment had taught her to distrust sudden good fortune. The following morning, Rebecca cornered her in the staff dining room. So, you've been angling for a promotion all this time, she hissed, eyes narrowed. Playing the sweet, humble act while seducing the richest guest. That's not, Olivia began, but Rebecca cut her off. Don't pretend. We all know what's happening. He feels sorry for you. It's just charity. She leaned closer, voice dropping to a whisper. Or maybe he has unusual tastes. Men like him sometimes do. Olivia flinched as if slapped. The words wormed their way into her mind, feeding doubts she'd been fighting all night. Was Rebecca right? Was this all some twisted game, or misplaced pity? Later that afternoon, Alexander found her in the garden, gathering lavender for the guest pillows. Have you considered my offer? He asked without preamble. Olivia straightened, meeting his gaze directly. Why are you really doing this, Mr. Bennett? Is it pity, or something else? The questions tumbled out before she could stop them. Something flashed in his eyes. Hurt, perhaps, or disappointment. I don't pity you, Miss Harper. I admire you. There's a significant difference. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I've built companies and lost them. I've hired people who looked perfect on paper but lacked soul in their work. I know talent when I see it. And that's all this is? Business? Olivia pressed, needing to understand. Alexander's expression remained unreadable. Would you prefer something else? The question hung between them, charged with unspoken possibilities. Olivia looked away first. I just want honesty. Then honestly, this is a business proposition that benefits us both. Nothing more, nothing less. His tone was measured, professional. The property needs someone with your sensibilities to become what I envision. I need a partner who understands hospitality from the ground up, not from business school textbooks. Olivia nodded slowly, a mixture of relief and something like disappointment settling in her chest. In that case, I'd like to see this property before deciding. I hoped you'd say that, Alexander replied, the faintest smile touching his lips. I've arranged for us to visit tomorrow afternoon, if that suits you. The next day, they drove in silence through winding country roads. Olivia sat stiffly in the passenger seat of Alexander's expensive car, conscious of her simple cotton dress and the way it strained slightly at the seams. She'd spent the morning fending off snide comments from Rebecca and concerned warnings from Mrs. Reynolds. Men like him don't just offer partnerships without expecting something in return, the cook had cautioned, patting Olivia's hand affectionately. Be careful, dear. The world can be cruel to women who trust too easily. The car slowed as they approached a narrow lane bordered by ancient oak trees. At the end stood Thornfield Hall, a sprawling Victorian mansion that had clearly seen better days. Ivy climbed haphazardly up stone walls. Windows were shuttered or broken, and the garden had long since surrendered to wilderness. Yet even in its neglected state, the house possessed a quiet dignity, a sense of dormant potential. It's been empty for nearly a decade, Alexander explained as they walked up the cracked path to the front door. The previous owners ran out of money for renovations and left it to deteriorate. Olivia barely heard him. She was drawn to the building as if by invisible threads, her eyes taking in the intricate woodwork, the possibilities hidden beneath years of neglect. This wasn't just a house. It was a story waiting to be continued. Inside, dust motes danced in sunlight that streamed through dirty windows. The entryway opened to a grand staircase, its banisters still elegant despite the tarnish of time. Olivia moved through the rooms slowly, seeing beyond the cobwebs and peeling wallpaper to what could be a cozy library with deep armchairs, a dining room where guests would linger over homemade meals, bedrooms where travelers would find rest and comfort. The foundation is sound, Alexander said, watching her reactions carefully. Most of the issues are cosmetic. though the plumbing and electrical systems need complete overhauls. It would take months of work, Olivia murmured, running her fingers along a dusty mantelpiece carved with delicate roses. And considerable investment. I have both time and capital, Alexander replied simply. What I lack is vision for the details that transform a house into a home. That's where you come in. They ended their tour in what had once been a conservatory, now empty save for a stone bench and skeletal remains of planters. Through broken glass panes, Olivia could see an overgrown garden, where jasmine and wild roses battled for territory. It was here, surrounded by abandoned beauty and the scent of possibilities, that Olivia felt something she hadn't experienced in years. A sense of belonging. Not because someone had granted her permission to exist in this space, but because the space itself seemed to welcome her. Curves, flaws, and all. It needs someone who understands nurturing, she said softly, almost to herself. Someone patient enough to coax beauty from neglect. Alexander stood silently beside her, hands in his pockets. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost its businesslike edge. Will you help me bring it back to life, Olivia? She turned to face him, really looking at him for perhaps the first time. Beyond his wealth and privilege, she saw something unexpected. Vulnerability, and perhaps a loneliness that mirrored her own. It occurred to her that broken things recognized each other, regardless of how different their breaking had been. I'll need to think about it, she answered honestly. This isn't just a job offer. It's a complete change of life. He nodded, seemingly unsurprised. Take all the time you need. The house has waited this long. It can wait a little longer. The drive back to Evergreen Hill was quieter still, both lost in thought. When they arrived, Alexander handed her a small key. For the side gate, if you want to visit again before deciding. Over the next few days, Olivia moved through her tasks at the retreat house mechanically, her mind constantly returning to Thornfield Hall. She researched restoration projects, calculated budgets, and sketched potential floor plans during her breaks. At night, she made lists of pros and cons until the pages of her notebook were full. On Friday evening, Elizabeth summoned her to the office again. Olivia expected another reprimand for some perceived failing, but instead found the coordinator looking unusually uncomfortable. Mr. Bennett has informed us you'll be leaving Evergreen Hill, Elizabeth said without preamble. He's already arranged for your final payment, including a generous severance. Olivia stared in confusion. But I haven't. Your replacement arrives tomorrow. Please have your belongings packed by noon. Elizabeth shuffled papers on her desk, avoiding eye contact. That will be all, Miss Harper. Stunned, Olivia returned to her room. Alexander had made the decision for her? Arranged her departure without consultation? The presumption stung worse than any insult Rebecca had thrown her way. When a soft knock came at her door hours later, she was still sitting on her bed, surrounded by half-packed belongings. May I come in? Alexander's voice was hesitant, unusual for him. Olivia opened the door, anger replacing her earlier uncertainty. You had no right to make assumptions about my decision. He nodded, accepting the rebuke. You're right. I overstepped. Why? She demanded. Alexander sighed, suddenly looking tired. I overheard Elizabeth and Rebecca planning to fire you on Monday. Something about missing linens and complaints from guests. Fabricated reasons, but they would have succeeded. Olivia's anger deflated slightly. So, this was protection? Partly, he admitted, but also impatience on my part. I've been watching you these past days, seeing you sketch plans for Thornfield when you thought no one was looking. A small smile crossed his face. You've already made your decision, Olivia. You're just afraid to trust it. The truth of his words resonated uncomfortably. She had made her decision the moment she stepped inside that neglected mansion. Everything since had been fear masquerading as caution. I need to leave on my own terms, she said finally. Not because someone else decided for me. Alexander nodded, understanding in his eyes. Then do it. Choose Thornfield. Not because I want you to, but because you want to. Because that house has been waiting for someone exactly like you. In that moment, looking into his earnest gray eyes, Olivia made her choice. Not for Alexander Bennett, not for financial security, but for herself, for the chance to create something beautiful from brokenness. I'll come, she said simply, but as a partner, not an employee. I need that to be clear. Partners, Alexander agreed, extending his hand. When Olivia placed her larger palm against his grip was firm and honest. Thornfield won't know what hit it. The following morning, Olivia packed her few belongings without fanfare. There were no goodbyes, No well wishes from most of the staff. Rebecca and her friends watched from the window, their muffled laughter following Olivia down the path. Mrs. Reynolds alone came to the service entrance, pressing a package into Olivia's hands. "My mother's bread recipes," she explained gruffly, "and a bit of her sourdough starter. Nearly 30 years old, that culture. Treat it well." Olivia hugged the older woman, tears threatening. "Thank you for your kindness." "Build something worth remembering," Mrs. Reynolds whispered back. "Show them all what they've missed by judging too quickly." Alexander waited by his car, loading Olivia's small suitcase into the trunk. The morning sun caught in his dark hair, turning stray strands to copper. For a fleeting moment, Olivia allowed herself to appreciate his quiet handsomeness, not with romantic notions, but with the simple acknowledgement that beauty existed in many forms, including the unexpected partnership forming between them. As the car pulled away from Evergreen Hill, Olivia didn't look back. The leather seat felt cool against her skin, the future ahead uncertain, but somehow right. She held her mother's quilt on her lap, carefully folded, and a small jar of natural yeast starter she had cultivated alone. "Ready?" Alexander asked, glancing her way. Olivia took a deep breath, feeling something like hope flutter in her chest. "Yes," she answered. "I think I am." What neither of them could know as they drove toward Thornfield Hall and its waiting possibilities was how profoundly this decision would change them both, or the challenges that lay ahead, waiting to test their resolve, their partnership, and eventually, their hearts. During the months that followed, Olivia discovered that dreams rarely unfold as imagined. Thornfield Hall revealed new challenges daily: rotting floorboards beneath deceptively sound carpets, a leaking roof that threatened precious woodwork, and plumbing that groaned ominously before surrendering completely. The projected budget doubled, then tripled. Contractors came and went, some reliable, others vanishing after collecting advances. Through it all, Olivia remained steady. She established a small apartment for herself in what had once been the housekeeper's quarters, a cozy space with windows overlooking the eastern garden. Each morning, she rose before dawn to update the renovation schedules, prepare simple meals for the workers, and tackle endless administrative tasks. By evening, her back ached, and her hands were often raw from testing paint samples or scrubbing salvageable fixtures. But satisfaction ran deeper than fatigue. Alexander visited 3 days each week, arriving with coffee and fresh bagels, his expensive suits gradually replaced by more practical attire. He handled the financial aspects and bureaucratic hurdles while deferring to Olivia on aesthetic decisions and spatial planning. Their partnership evolved into an easy rhythm, professional, yet increasingly comfortable. "I never anticipated this much dust," Alexander remarked one afternoon, wiping his brow as they surveyed the newly sanded floors in what would become the main dining room. "My financial advisors think I've lost my mind, pouring money into this place." Olivia looked up from where she knelt, testing stain colors on an inconspicuous corner. "Having second thoughts?" "Not one." His answer came without hesitation. "Though I admit, I underestimated the scope of the project." "Most dreams are like that," Olivia replied, a small smile playing at her lips. "Bigger, messier, and more expensive than they appear from a distance." Alexander studied her for a moment, something unreadable crossing his features. "You never ask about my background. Most people would be curious." Olivia shrugged, returning to her stain samples. "Your Forbes profile answered most questions. The rest seemed private." His eyebrows rose slightly. "You researched me?" "Of course." She met his gaze directly. "I needed to know who I was partnering with. The internet provides efficient overviews." A laugh escaped him, a genuine sound that transformed his usually serious face. "And what did this efficient overview tell you?" "That Alexander Bennett built a tech company in his 20s, sold it for millions before 30, then became a somewhat reclusive investor with an unexpected interest in historic properties." She wiped her hands on a rag. "The articles mentioned a broken engagement 3 years ago, but were disappointingly vague on details." Alexander's expression clouded momentarily. "Yes. Well, the tabloids were less restrained. Jilted tech millionaire left at the altar makes for compelling headlines." Olivia's heart twinged with unexpected sympathy. "Is that why you bought this place? To hide away?" "Initially, perhaps." He moved to the window, gazing out at the overgrown gardens. "Caroline, my ex-fiancée, always said I worked too much, felt too little. She called me emotionally unavailable." A humorless smile crossed his face. "Then she became available to my business partner while I was in Japan closing a deal." "I'm sorry," Olivia said softly. Alexander turned back to her, composure restored. Ancient history. What about you? The efficient overview works both ways, yet I found remarkably little about Olivia Harper online. Small-town lives leave small digital footprints. She rose from the floor, dusting off her knees. No dramatic heartbreaks or business empires. Just a woman who made bread, lost her grandmother, and drifted until finding herself at Evergreen Hill. What she didn't mention were the years of quiet pain, the elementary school taunts that evolved into high school cruelty, the dates that turned out to be cruel pranks, the job interviews where eyes skimmed her body with poorly disguised judgment. She didn't speak of nights spent wondering what was wrong with her, of diets abandoned in tears, or of learning to make herself smaller emotionally when she couldn't be smaller physically. Alexander seemed to hear some of what remained unspoken. People can be needlessly cruel, he said quietly. They can also be surprisingly kind, she countered, thinking of Mrs. Reynolds and her precious sourdough starter, now thriving on Olivia's kitchen counter. This floor will need another day to dry before we stain it. Should we check the progress upstairs? The conversation shifted back to safer territory. Paint colors and hardware finishes, delivery schedules and contractor timelines. Yet something had subtly changed between them. A layer of formality peeled away to reveal glimpses of vulnerability on both sides. As summer melted into autumn, Thornfield Hall gradually transformed. Olivia hired a small local staff. Marta, a no-nonsense housekeeper with 3 decades of hotel experience. Daniel, a retired chef eager to create seasonal menus. Hannah, a shy college student who managed reservations and social media. And Theo, a handyman whose quiet competence kept the aging building systems functioning. November brought crisp wins and the scheduled opening date. While Alexander managed press relations and finalized permits, Olivia fretted over final touches. Homemade soaps in the bathrooms, locally woven throws for the reading nooks, and welcome baskets featuring her signature sweet potato bread. The night before opening, snowflakes began to fall, earlier than forecasted and heavier by the hour. Olivia stood by the kitchen window, anxiety building as she watched roads disappearing under white blankets. Their first guests, a couple celebrating their anniversary, were scheduled to arrive tomorrow, along with a writer from Travel and Leisure magazine. This wasn't in the business plan, she murmured to herself, checking her phone for weather alerts. The forecast had worsened, 8 to 10 inches expected, with high winds creating potential whiteout conditions. The sound of tires crunching on snow pulled her attention outside. Alexander's car was carefully navigating the already treacherous driveway. She hadn't expected him until morning. He burst through the door in a flurry of snowflakes, his usually impeccable hair tousled by wind. The highway's already down to 1 lane. They're predicting power outages. Olivia's stomach sank. The guests, I've called them, he interrupted, shrugging off his coat. Offered full refunds or complimentary stays when the weather clears. Most chose to reschedule. Most? Alexander ran a hand through his damp hair. The magazine writer is determined to make it. Says the snow adds character to the story. He sounded both impressed and exasperated. I tried to dissuade her, but Emily Chen has a reputation for stubbornness. Emily Chen? Olivia felt the blood drain from her face. From Travel and Leisure? You know her. Olivia turned away, busying herself with the kettle. Not personally. Her articles are quite thorough. What she didn't say was that she recognized the name from a particularly scathing review of a small bakery in her hometown 3 years earlier. A review that had mentioned the disconcerting sight of the overweight owner handling delicate pastries. The casual cruelty had stayed with Olivia, though she'd never mentioned it to anyone. She may not make it through this storm anyway, Alexander said, peering out at the worsening weather. But we should prepare as if she will. They spent the evening checking emergency systems, staging flashlights and candles throughout the inn, and ensuring the generator was fueled and operational. Around midnight, with the snow still falling relentlessly, Alexander peered out at the unrecognizable landscape. I should have left hours ago, he said, frowning. The roads must be impassable by now. There are 5 empty guest rooms, Olivia pointed out, all with freshly laundered sheets and excellent mattresses that cost more than my first car. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Are you offering me accommodation, Miss Harper? At the friends and family rate, Mr. Bennett. Which is? 1 cup of coffee, delivered to the Blue Room at 7 tomorrow morning. She tried for a light tone, ignoring the strange flutter in her chest at the thought of Alexander staying overnight. He laughed softly. Deal. Morning brought eerie quiet and transformed landscapes. The storm had passed, leaving behind nearly a foot of pristine snow and a world glittering under weak sunshine. Olivia woke early, her breath visible in the chilled air. The power had indeed failed overnight. The backup generator provided minimal heating to prevent pipes from freezing, but little comfort beyond that. She dressed quickly in layers, added an extra pair of socks, and made her way to the kitchen. The old-fashioned wood stove, installed more for ambiance than necessity, now proved its worth. Soon she had a fire crackling, water boiling, and coffee brewing the old-fashioned way. "Something smells wonderful." Alexander's voice from the doorway startled her. He looked different in the morning light, hair tousled from sleep, yesterday's shirt wrinkled, stubble darkening his jaw. More human somehow. Less the successful businessman and more the man. Olivia handed him a steaming mug. "I thought successful entrepreneurs required expensive espresso machines and single-origin beans. This entrepreneur requires caffeine in any form before coherent thought is possible." He took a grateful sip. "Though this is considerably better than any form." "My grandmother's method," Olivia explained, turning to check the Dutch oven where dough had been proofing overnight. She believed coffee should be strong enough to defend itself. Alexander watched as she worked, her movements efficient and practiced. "You mentioned your grandmother often. She must have been important to you." "She raised me after my parents died." Olivia shaped the dough with gentle hands, not looking up. "Car accident when I was 8. Grandma Rose was all I had left." "I'm sorry," Alexander said quietly. "Was she the one who taught you to bake?" A genuine smile warmed Olivia's face. "And to garden, and to sew, and to see beauty in broken things." She slid the bread into the oven. She had arthritis in her later years. Her hands would swell and ache. "I became her hands. That's how I learned." Before Alexander could respond, a sharp knock echoed from the front entrance. They exchanged surprised glances. "Surely not," Olivia began. But it was indeed Emily Chen at the door, her petite figure bundled in an expensive parka, snowshoes strapped to her feet, and a camera slung around her neck. "Good morning," she called brightly. "Hope I'm not too early. Had to park half a mile down and snowshoe the rest of the way." She stomped snow from her boots, seemingly energized rather than exhausted by her trek. "Absolutely worth it for these shots. The place looks magical in fresh snow." Olivia froze momentarily before her hospitality training took over. "Welcome to Thornfield Inn. I'm Olivia Harper, the manager. Please come in. We've lost power but have coffee and fresh bread nearly ready." Emily removed her outer layers, revealing a slender woman in her 40s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Her gaze traveled over Olivia quickly before settling on Alexander. "Mr. Bennett," she said, extending a gloved hand. "Emily Chen. We met briefly at the Hospitality Expo in Chicago last spring." "Of course," Alexander replied smoothly, though Olivia suspected he had no recollection of the meeting. "Your dedication to this story is impressive." "The best pieces require effort," Emily said, fishing a notebook from her bag. "And honestly, this scenario is perfect. Guests seek authenticity in their experiences now. What could be more authentic than weathering a power outage in a historic property?" Over the next few hours, Emily toured the snowbound property, photographing frost-laced windows and snow-covered gardens. She asked detailed questions about the renovation process, the building's history, and their vision for the guest experience. Her manner remained professionally cordial, with no indication she recognized Olivia from the bakery incident years ago. By mid-afternoon, the county snowplows had cleared the main roads. Power remained out, but the generator kept essential systems running. Emily prepared to leave after completing her interviews. "One last question," she said, jotting notes. "What made you choose Ms. Harper as your manager, Mr. Bennett?" "It's an unusual partnership." Alexander glanced at Olivia, something protective flashing in his eyes. "Unusual how?" Emily's smile remained pleasant, but her gaze sharpened. "A tech millionaire and a small-town baker without formal hospitality training? You must admit, it's unexpected." "The best partnerships often are," Alexander replied evenly. "Olivia brings authenticity and heart to this project that no business school graduate could provide. She sees what others miss." Emily nodded, scribbling in her notebook. "And Ms. Harper, what drew you to this venture?" "Quite a leap from baking bread at farmers' markets." Olivia met her gaze steadily, refusing to be intimidated. "Thornfield needed someone who understands nurturing, whether it's bread dough, gardens, or spaces. The medium changes, but the principles remain the same." Something flickered across Emily's face. Recognition, perhaps, or reassessment. "Well put." She closed her notebook. "Expect the article in our January issue." You've created something special here. After Emily departed, Olivia released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. That went better than expected. Alexander studied her curiously. You seemed tense around her, more than the situation warranted. Did I? Olivia busied herself stoking the wood stove. Pre-opening nerves, I suppose. He didn't press, but his gaze suggested he knew there was more to the story. Power company estimates electricity will be restored by evening. I should head out while roads are clear. A strange reluctance settled over Olivia at the thought of his departure. The overnight storm had shifted something between them, made their partnership feel less like a business arrangement and more like something she wasn't ready to name. Of course, she said briskly. I'll update you on the rescheduled arrivals. Alexander lingered at the door, seeming uncharacteristically hesitant. You've created something remarkable here, Olivia. Not just a beautiful space, but a feeling. It's what I hoped for, but couldn't quite articulate when we started this project. Warmth bloomed in her chest at his words. We created it, she corrected gently. Partnership. Remember? His smile reached his eyes, crinkling the corners. Partnership. December brought the official opening of Thornfield Inn, with guests arriving to experience the restored mansion decorated for the holidays. Olivia had transformed the grand entry with garlands of fresh pine, antique ornaments, and subtle twinkling lights. The library featured a towering tree adorned with handmade decorations contributed by local artisans, while the dining room glowed with candlelight during evening meals. The first weeks exceeded expectations, with guests enchanted by the inn's atmosphere and Daniel's seasonal cuisine. Reviews on travel sites praised the attention to detail, the comfortable elegance, and especially the warm hospitality. Emily Chen's article appeared in early January, a glowing 4-page spread with stunning photography and effusive praise for the magical transformation of a forgotten treasure. To Olivia's relief, the piece focused entirely on Thornfield's charms without personal comments about its management. As winter deepened, a comfortable routine developed. Alexander spent weekends at the inn, often staying through Monday to analyze the previous week's operations and plan improvements. He and Olivia would share late dinners after guests retired, discussing business over wine in the kitchen or library. These conversations gradually expanded beyond Thornfield to include childhood memories, favorite books, travel experiences, and philosophical debates that often continued until the early hours. Olivia found herself looking forward to these evenings more than she cared to admit. Alexander's presence had become comfortable, his dry humor and thoughtful insights a highlight of her weeks. Their friendship deepened with each conversation, built on mutual respect and shared purpose. Yet she guarded her heart carefully, reminding herself that their relationship remained professional at its core. Alexander treated her with unfailing respect, but had never indicated interest beyond friendship and business partnership. His occasional lingering gazes or casual touches were likely meaningless, and allowing herself to imagine otherwise would lead only to disappointment. February brought Valentine's weekend, with Thornfield fully booked by couples seeking romantic getaways. Daniel created special menus featuring aphrodisiac ingredients, while Olivia arranged for local musicians to provide ambient music in the evenings. The weekend promised to be their most profitable yet. 3 days before Valentine's, Alexander called with unexpected news. I've invited potential investors to experience Thornfield this weekend, he explained, his voice tinny through the poor connection. The Whitaker Group is interested in funding similar restoration projects across New England. Olivia frowned, sorting through guest reservations on her desk. We're completely booked. Even your usual room is reserved. I know it's last minute, he acknowledged, but this could mean expansion opportunities for Thornfield. Robert Whitaker doesn't make these offers lightly. So you want me to cancel someone's Valentine's reservation? Olivia couldn't keep the edge from her voice. Couples who booked months ago? Of course not. Alexander sounded surprised by her tone. I've arranged for Whitaker and his associate to stay at the Pines down the road. They'll join us for dinner and tours during the day. Olivia relaxed slightly. I see. When do they arrive? Friday afternoon. I'll come Thursday to help prepare. He paused. Is everything all right? You sound tense. Just busy, she replied, not wanting to admit how his call had momentarily shaken her. The thought of Alexander prioritizing investors over their carefully crafted guest experience had triggered old insecurities, fears that eventually business would trump the heart they'd built into Thornfield. Thursday evening brought freezing rain that coated trees and roadways with treacherous ice. Alexander arrived later than planned, his normally immaculate appearance disheveled from white-knuckle driving on slippery roads. "Remind me why I bought property in this weather zone?" he asked, accepting the hot tea Olivia offered in the kitchen. "Because New England has seasons, which tourists find charming," she replied with a smile. Though February admittedly tests that charm. They settled at the harvest table to review preparations for the investor's visit. Alexander pulled documents from his briefcase, spreading them across the wooden surface. "Whitaker's primarily interested in the business model," he explained. "Return on investment, operational efficiencies, scalability, the usual metrics." Olivia skimmed the financial projections he'd prepared, frowning slightly. "These numbers assume increased room rates and decreased staffing costs. That's not the experience we've built here." Alexander sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I know, but Whitaker speaks spreadsheet, not ambiance. We need to translate what makes Thornfield special into terms he understands. And if what makes it special doesn't translate to his spreadsheets," Olivia challenged, a knot forming in her stomach. "If the economics of caring this much don't satisfy his return requirements, then we thank him for his interest and continue as planned," Alexander said firmly. "This is an exploration, Olivia, not a surrender. I promised you a partnership of equals, and I meant it." She wanted to believe him, but experience had taught her that money eventually changed everything and everyone. Friday morning brought clearing skies and the arrival of the season's first red-winged blackbirds at the feeders Olivia had installed throughout the property. She took it as a good omen as she prepared for both Valentine's guests and the investor visit. By noon, check-ins were underway for couples arriving with excited expressions and overnight bags. Olivia greeted each personally. Hannah handled paperwork, and Marta guided guests to their rooms, where welcome baskets awaited with champagne, artisanal chocolates, and Olivia's heart-shaped sweet potato rolls. Alexander remained in his office, the converted morning room, fielding calls and preparing for Whitaker's visit. When he emerged mid-afternoon, he'd transformed back into the polished businessman Olivia sometimes forgot existed beneath the more casual version she'd come to know. His tailored suit and crisp manner formed an invisible barrier that left her suddenly conscious of her simple dress and flour-dusted apron. "You look," he began, then paused as if reconsidering his words. "Very professional." Olivia bristled slightly at what felt like a careful non-compliment. "Thank you. So do you." She nodded toward the window. "Your investors have arrived." A sleek black car had pulled into the circular drive. From it emerged two men, one older with silver hair and an imposing presence, the other younger with sharp features and calculating eyes. Alexander squared his shoulders almost imperceptibly. "Robert Whitaker," he murmured, "and his nephew James. They rarely travel without each other." "Business and family," Olivia observed. "Complicated combination." Indeed, something in Alexander's tone suggested personal experience with that particular complication. The introductions in the foyer were brief but cordial. Robert Whitaker exuded authority tempered with practiced charm, while James observed everything with analytical intensity. "Remarkable transformation," Robert commented, glancing around the entryway. "The photographs don't do it justice." "Credit goes primarily to my partner," Alexander replied, gesturing to Olivia. Her vision shaped every aspect of Thornfield's restoration. Robert's gaze shifted to Olivia, assessment clear in his eyes. If he was surprised by her appearance, he hid it well. "Impressive work, Ms. Harper. You have an eye for authenticity." "Thank you," Olivia replied simply. "Would you like a tour before your dinner reservation?" As they moved through the property, Robert asked insightful questions about operational decisions and guest feedback. James remained largely silent, occasionally making notes on his tablet. When they reached the library, Olivia's favorite space with its floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and reading nooks, Robert paused. "This room particularly successful," he noted. "Guests linger here?" Olivia nodded. "Average of 45 minutes per visit according to our observations. The selections are curated to reflect local history and seasonal themes." "Smart," Robert murmured. "Experience design disguised as casual comfort." He turned to Alexander. "You've found a genuine talent here, Bennett." The tour concluded in the sunroom overlooking the South Gardens, now in their winter dormancy, but meticulously planned for spring blooming. "We have dinner reservations at 7, Alexander reminded the Whitakers. "Olivia, will you join us?" Before she could respond, Hannah appeared at the doorway. "Sorry to interrupt, but there's a situation in the kitchen that needs your attention." In the industrial kitchen, Daniel was handling multiple dinner preparations, while simultaneously dealing with a delivery error. They sent regular flour instead of the gluten-free for tonight's special desserts, he explained tersely. 2 couples mentioned severe allergies when they booked. I'll handle it, Olivia assured him, already reaching for her coat. The specialty market in town should still be open. Continue with the other preparations. She hurried out the service entrance, not wanting to disturb the investor meeting. The errand took longer than expected. The first market had sold out, requiring a drive to the neighboring town. By the time Olivia returned, dusk had fallen, and dinner service was underway. Daniel accepted the specialty flour with obvious relief. Just in time. Go change. They're waiting for you at the owner's table. Change? Olivia glanced down at her practical outfit, suddenly aware of the flour dust and kitchen smudges accumulated throughout the day. Mr. Bennett specifically asked that you join them when you returned, Daniel explained, already measuring ingredients. Said to tell you the reservation is too important to miss. Olivia hurried to her quarters, heart inexplicably racing. She rarely joined Alexander for business dinners, typically handling behind-the-scenes operations while he managed investor relations. Tonight's invitation felt significant, though she couldn't articulate exactly why. Her wardrobe offered limited options for upscale dining. Eventually, she selected her best dress, a deep burgundy wrap style that accommodated her curves without emphasizing them. A touch of makeup, pearl earrings that had belonged to her grandmother, and she was as prepared as possible. The private dining room glowed with candlelight when Olivia entered. Alexander rose immediately, a warm smile replacing the business mask he'd worn earlier. There you are. Crisis averted? Disaster prevented, she confirmed, accepting the chair he pulled out for her. My apologies for the delay, gentlemen. Robert Whitaker waved away her concern. Alexander was just sharing the origin story of Thornfield. Quite the fortuitous partnership, it seems. Indeed. James spoke for the first time, his gaze moving between Olivia and Alexander with undisguised curiosity. Though unusual, Alexander's expression remained pleasant, but Olivia noticed his jaw tighten slightly. The best partnerships often transcend conventional expectations. Dinner progressed smoothly, the conversation flowing between business topics and broader hospitality trends. Robert proved surprisingly knowledgeable about historic properties, while James demonstrated sharp financial acumen. Throughout the meal, Olivia felt James watching her with calculated interest that made her increasingly uncomfortable. As dessert was served, the successfully gluten-free chocolate soufflés, James finally addressed her directly. So, Ms. Harper, what exactly is your relationship with Alexander? Business partners, certainly, but is there more to the story? An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Olivia's cheeks warmed as she set down her spoon. Mr. Bennett and I share a vision for Thornfield Inn. Our partnership is built on mutual respect and complementary skills. Of course, James smiled thinly. I simply wondered if there might be a more personal element to your arrangement. Alexander has always had a talent for recognizing unconventional beauty. The implication hung in the air, poisonous in its false sympathy. Olivia felt the familiar cold wash of humiliation, followed by a flare of anger. Before she could respond, Alexander's voice cut through the tension, his tone dangerously soft. James, I value our business relationship with Whitaker Group, but if you disrespect my partner again, that relationship will end immediately. Robert cleared his throat, clearly displeased with his nephew. You'll have to forgive James. His social intelligence lags behind his financial acumen. He turned to Olivia. Please accept my apology for his inappropriate comment. Olivia nodded stiffly, unable to form words past the tightness in her throat. The remainder of the meal passed in stilted conversation until the Whitakers finally departed for their hotel, Robert expressing genuine admiration for Thornfield, while James maintained a sullen silence. When the door closed behind them, Alexander turned to Olivia, concern evident in his expression. I'm sorry about that. James has always been— It's fine, she interrupted, not meeting his eyes. Nothing I haven't heard before. It's not fine, Alexander countered, his voice tight with restrained anger. It was deliberately cruel and completely unacceptable. Olivia finally looked at him, vulnerability warring with pride. Why did you defend me? It could cost you the investment. Alexander stepped closer, his expression softening. Because you're worth more than any investment, Olivia. What we've built here is worth more. He hesitated, then added quietly, What I feel for you is worth more. Her heart stuttered. What you feel? Surely you've noticed, he said, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain. I've tried to maintain professional boundaries. But these past months working alongside you, getting to know you." He trailed off, searching her face. "I've fallen in love with your strength, your vision, your kindness. With you, Olivia." The words she'd never expected to hear from anyone, let alone from him, left her momentarily speechless. Years of protective walls built around her heart trembled at his confession. "Alexander," she finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't have to say these things because you feel sorry for me." Pain flashed across his face. "Is that what you think? That this is pity?" "I don't know what to think," she admitted. "Men like you don't typically fall for women like me." "Men like me?" A small, sad smile touched his lips. "Workaholic, emotionally guarded men who've been unlucky in love and hide behind their success? Or did you mean wealthy men who society assumes should only desire certain types of partners?" Put that way, it did sound like unfair prejudice, just from the opposite direction. Olivia felt her certainties wavering. "I need time," she said finally. "This is unexpected." Alexander nodded, respecting her hesitation. "Take all the time you need. My feelings won't change." As Olivia returned to her quarters that night, emotions churned within her. Hope battling with deeply ingrained doubt, desire struggling against fear of disappointment. Sleep eluded her as she replayed Alexander's words, searching for hidden meanings or future regrets. Dawn found her in the kitchen, seeking comfort in the familiar routine of bread making. The rhythmic kneading helped order her thoughts, the simple chemistry of flour and water grounding her spinning mind. So absorbed was she in this meditation of movement that she didn't hear the kitchen door open, didn't notice the visitor until a throat cleared softly behind her. Turning, flour-dusted hands paused mid-motion. Olivia found herself facing Caroline Winters, Alexander's former fiancée, her slender figure impeccably dressed despite the early hour, her perfect features arranged in a pleasant smile that didn't reach her calculating eyes. "Good morning," Caroline said, her voice cultured and cool. "You must be Olivia. I hope you don't mind the early intrusion, but I've come to discuss Alexander and the unfortunate misunderstanding that seems to be developing between you." Olivia stared at the woman before her, momentarily speechless. Caroline Winters personified everything Olivia was not: willowy, elegant, with the kind of effortless beauty that opened doors without question. Even at this early hour, her blonde hair fell in perfect waves around porcelain features, her designer outfit impeccably tailored to her slender frame. "I'm sorry," Olivia finally managed, wiping flour from her hands. "The inn isn't open to non-guests until 9. Caroline's smile remained fixed and cool. "I'm not here as a guest. I'm here as someone who cares deeply about Alexander's well-being." She glanced around the kitchen with practiced disinterest. "Charming little project he's found for himself." The dismissive tone made Olivia's spine stiffen. "Thornfield is a successful business, not a hobby." "Of course," Caroline agreed with transparent insincerity. "Alexander has always needed diversions when he's between serious endeavors." She set her designer handbag on the counter, claiming space with casual entitlement. "I should get to the point. Alexander and I have been discussing reconciliation for months. Our history is complicated but significant." The room seemed to tilt slightly under Olivia's feet. "He hasn't mentioned that." "He wouldn't," Caroline sighed, as if explaining something to a child. "Alexander has always been protective of others' feelings. It's one of his most endearing qualities." She pulled out her phone, tapping the screen before turning it toward Olivia. "Last month's charity gala. We've been cautiously reconnecting, keeping things private until we're certain." The photograph showed Alexander in a tuxedo, Caroline on his arm in a stunning evening gown, both smiling at the camera. They looked perfect together, a matched set from the same exclusive world. "Why are you telling me this?" Olivia asked, though a sickening certainty was already forming in her stomach. Caroline's expression softened with practiced sympathy. "Because James Whitaker called me last night, concerned about his meeting here. He mentioned Alexander seemed unusually attached to you." She paused delicately. "I know how persuasive Alexander can be when he's enthusiastic about a project, how his attention can feel special. I wouldn't want you to misinterpret business interest for something more personal." Olivia's hands trembled slightly as she untied her apron. The half-kneaded dough sat forgotten on the floured surface. "I think you should leave. I've upset you," Caroline observed without remorse. "That wasn't my intention. I simply thought you deserved honesty." She collected her bag with practiced grace. Alexander values your contribution to this venture. I wouldn't want misunderstandings to jeopardize that professional relationship. Before Olivia could respond, the kitchen door swung open as Daniel arrived to begin breakfast preparations. He paused, sensing the tension in the room. Caroline seized the interruption as an exit opportunity. "Thank you for your time, Ms. Harper. I'll see myself out." After she departed, Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Everything all right?" "Fine," Olivia replied automatically, though nothing felt remotely fine. "I need some air. Can you manage breakfast without me?" Without waiting for his response, she escaped through the service entrance and into the crisp February morning. The sun had barely crested the horizon, painting the snow-covered gardens in pale gold light. Olivia walked blindly, her mind replaying Alexander's words from the previous night alongside Caroline's revelations. Had she imagined the sincerity in his voice? Mistaken business partnership for something deeper? It wouldn't be the first time she'd projected feelings where none existed. By the time she circled back to the inn, breakfast service was underway. She slipped in through the back, avoiding the dining room where Valentine's couples lingered over coffee and pastries. In her quarters, she splashed cold water on her face and changed clothes, attempting to compose herself for the day's responsibilities. A knock at her door startled her. She opened it to find Alexander, concern evident in his expression. "Daniel said you seemed upset this morning. Is it about last night?" "I shouldn't have—" "Caroline was here," Olivia interrupted, unable to maintain pleasantries. Alexander's face registered genuine shock. "Caroline? Here? Why?" "To warn me about misinterpreting your attention." Olivia met his gaze directly. "She showed me pictures from last month's charity gala. Mentioned you've been discussing reconciliation?" Alexander's expression shifted from confusion to understanding to anger. "That's not—" He stopped, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "Yes, I attended the gala. It was for a foundation my company supports. Caroline was there with friends and asked to take a photo for social media. That's all. And the reconciliation discussions? Non-existent," he stated firmly. "I haven't considered reconciliation since the day I found her with my business partner." Olivia wanted to believe him. The earnestness in his eyes seemed genuine. But doubt, once planted, grew quickly in soil long fertilized by insecurity. "Why would she lie?" she asked quietly. Alexander's jaw tightened. "Because control is what Caroline values most, and because James Whitaker is her cousin, not just Robert's nephew. They've always been close." "Her cousin?" The revelation added a new dimension to James's pointed comments at dinner. "Yes." Alexander's expression darkened. "Which means he reported our conversation to her, and she decided to intervene. Typical Caroline efficiency. Eliminate perceived threats before they develop. And I'm a threat?" The concept seemed absurd to Olivia. That someone like Caroline would view her as competition. To her plans? Apparently. Alexander stepped closer, his voice softening. "Olivia, I meant every word I said last night. There's nothing between Caroline and me except an unpleasant history I'd rather forget." Olivia wanted to fall into the certainty he offered, but years of experiencing the world's cruelty had taught her caution. "I need time to think, Alexander. Please." He nodded, respecting her boundary, though pain flickered across his features. "Of course. Take all the time you need." The Valentine's weekend proceeded with professional precision despite the emotional undercurrents. Olivia immersed herself in operational details, ensuring each guest's experience remained magical while carefully maintaining distance from Alexander. He respected her request for space, focusing on the investor discussions while sending occasional glances her way that held questions she wasn't ready to answer. Sunday evening brought departure preparations for most guests. Olivia supervised turn-down service in the East Wing when Hannah found her, tablet in hand. "There's a problem with the McNamara reservation," the young woman explained. "They were supposed to check out tomorrow morning, but Mrs. McNamara is asking if they can extend through Tuesday. Her mother's fallen ill back home, and they're waiting to hear if they need to return immediately." Olivia checked the reservation system. "We can accommodate them. Let them know it's not a problem." "That's the thing." Hannah hesitated. "Their room is booked for tomorrow night. The magazine photo shoot, remember? We're fully committed for the rest of the week with the corporate retreat. The upcoming photo spread in New England home represented significant marketing potential. Rescheduling would mean months of delay." "I'll handle it," Olivia assured her. "Ask Daniel to send tea service to the library in 20 minutes." In the cozy library, Sarah McNamara explained their situation, gratitude evident in her tired eyes. "Mom's had a heart scare. They're running tests tonight. but we won't know until tomorrow if we need to fly back to Chicago. Of course, family comes first, Olivia assured her. We'll make arrangements. After discussing options, they settled on moving the McNamara's to the smaller Gardener's suite for the extended stay. Not ideal, but workable. The couple departed for dinner looking relieved, leaving Olivia to rework the week's complex reservation puzzle. She was deep in scheduling adjustments when Alexander entered the library, hands in his pockets. Hannah mentioned a booking issue. Under control, Olivia replied without looking up from her tablet. Just juggling some room assignments. Alexander settled into the adjacent armchair. The Whitakers left this afternoon. Robert was impressed with Thornfield, said it exceeded his expectations in every way. And the investment opportunity? He's interested, but I declined for now. Alexander's calm statement drew Olivia's startled gaze. I told him we're not ready for expansion until Thornfield is exactly where we want it to be. That's not what we discussed, she said carefully. Alexander leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Expansion would mean dividing our attention, bringing in corporate management structures, standardizing what makes this place special. His eyes held hers. I realized I'm not willing to risk what we've built here for rapid growth. The "we" hung between them, heavy with meaning beyond business partnership. Before Olivia could respond, her tablet chimed with an incoming email. She glanced down automatically, then froze. What is it? Alexander asked, noting her sudden stillness. Emily Chen, Olivia said quietly. The Travel and Leisure article is live on their website. Together they huddled over the tablet, scrolling through Emily's glowing review of Thornfield Inn. The writer praised the thoughtful restoration, the attention to authentic details, and the warm hospitality that transforms a mere stay into a genuine homecoming. She loves it, Alexander murmured, relief evident in his voice. Olivia nodded, continuing to scroll until she reached the article's final paragraphs. The true magic of Thornfield Inn lies not merely in its architectural resurrection or its impeccable service, but in the palpable heart that infuses every corner. This reviewer has visited countless luxury properties where perfectionism created sterile showpieces rather than living spaces. Thornfield avoids this pitfall through the vision of its unlikely management team. Alexander Bennett, the tech entrepreneur who purchased the property, wisely partnered with Olivia Harper, whose background in artisanal food and community-centered hospitality brings authenticity often missing from high-end accommodations. Together, they've created something increasingly rare in our standardized world, a place with genuine soul. In full disclosure, this isn't my first encounter with Harper's work. Years ago, I wrote a scathing review of her hometown bakery, a review that shamefully focused more on Harper herself than on her exceptional creations. That review revealed more about my own shallow values than about her talents. Encountering her vision at Thornfield has been a humbling reminder that true expertise often exists where we least expect it, and that preconceptions, particularly about appearance, blind us to extraordinary gifts hiding in plain sight. Olivia stared at the words, reading them twice to ensure she hadn't misunderstood. Emily Chen, whose casual cruelty had once reinforced Olivia's deepest insecurities, had publicly acknowledged her error and praised not just Thornfield, but Olivia herself. She remembered me, Olivia whispered, emotion tightening her throat. Alexander looked confused. You've met before? You said you didn't know her personally. I didn't. She reviewed my bakery once. Olivia swallowed hard. It wasn't a kind review. Understanding dawned in Alexander's eyes. That's why you were so tense around her during the snowstorm. Olivia nodded, unable to form words past the emotion constricting her chest. Years of accumulated hurts, from childhood taunts to adult dismissals, seemed to crystallize in this moment of unexpected vindication. Alexander moved closer, tentatively taking her hand. When she didn't pull away, he spoke softly. You know she's right. About you. About what you've created here. What we've created, Olivia corrected automatically, echoing their familiar exchange. Partnership, he agreed, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. But Olivia, I meant what I said. My feelings go beyond business, beyond friendship. He paused, vulnerability evident in his expression. I understand if you don't feel the same, if you need time or space, but please don't let Caroline's manipulations or past hurts convince you that what I feel isn't real. Olivia looked into his earnest gray eyes and felt something within her shift. A wall crumbling, a certainty emerging. This man had seen her truly from the beginning. Not just her body or her skills, but her essence. He had valued her when others dismissed her, championed her when others undermined her. "I'm afraid," she admitted quietly. "Not of you, but of believing in this. In us. The world has spent a lifetime telling me that women who look like me don't get fairy tale endings with men who look like you." "The world is frequently wrong," Alexander replied simply. "About what matters, about who deserves happiness, about the shape love takes." He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "I fell in love with your kindness, your vision, your strength, with the way you hum while kneading bread and the fierce protectiveness you show toward everyone who works here." Tears blurred Olivia's vision as years of defensive barriers yielded to hope. "I think I've been falling in love with you since you left that cookbook on the kitchen counter at Evergreen Hill." Alexander's smile transformed his face, crinkling the corners of his eyes in the way that had become precious to her. "That long? And here I thought I was being subtle." A laugh escaped her, watery but genuine. "You were. I just wasn't ready to see it." "And now?" he asked, the question gentle but direct. Instead of answering with words, Olivia leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was soft, tentative at first, then deepening as Alexander's arms encircled her. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Olivia felt lighter than she had in years, as if a burden she'd carried so long she'd forgotten its weight had finally lifted. "I'll take that as a positive sign," Alexander murmured, his forehead resting against hers. The weeks that followed unfolded like a dream Olivia hadn't dared imagine. Their relationship developed with the same care and attention they'd given Thornfield, thoughtfully, with deep respect for the foundation they'd already built. Alexander's business trips shortened. His time at the inn extended. Their partnership deepened on every level, personal discoveries intertwining with professional collaboration. March arrived with thawing earth and the first crocuses pushing through retreating snow. Thornfield's reputation continued to grow. Reservations booked months in advance. The staff expanded cautiously to meet demand while maintaining the personal touch that had become their signature. On the first truly warm day of spring, Alexander suggested a walk through the gardens. Olivia happily agreed, eager to check the early plantings and enjoy the strengthening sunshine. They strolled hand in hand, discussing summer plans and potential improvements to the property. Near the ornamental pond, now free of ice and visited by returning birds, Alexander suddenly stopped. "Do you remember the first time we came here? When I showed you Thornfield before renovations?" Olivia smiled at the memory. "It was a mess. Overgrown gardens, broken windows. But somehow I could see what it could become." "You saw possibility where others saw only decay," Alexander said softly. "That's your gift, Olivia. You've always been able to see beauty in damaged things, whether buildings or bread dough or..." He hesitated, a rare vulnerability crossing his features. "Or people like me." "You weren't damaged," she protested. "Just cautious. Like me." Alexander smiled, taking both her hands in his. "We were both hiding, in our own ways. You behind your work, me behind my success. Neither of us expecting to find someone who could see past those barriers." Olivia's heart quickened at the intensity in his gaze. "Alexander, I had a whole speech prepared," he admitted with a self-deprecating laugh. "About partnership and vision and building something lasting. But standing here with you, words seem inadequate." He released her hands only to reach into his pocket, withdrawing a small velvet box. "So I'll simply ask, Olivia Harper, will you marry me?" The box opened to reveal a ring unlike any Olivia had seen. Not a traditional diamond solitaire, but a warm rose gold band set with a mosaic of smaller stones in amber and honey tones, catching the spring sunlight like crystallized warmth. "It reminded me of you," Alexander explained nervously as her silence extended. "Warm and unique and beautifully unconventional." "If you don't like it, it's perfect," Olivia interrupted, tears blurring her vision. "And yes, I'll marry you." Alexander's face transformed with joy as he slipped the ring onto her finger. When he pulled her into his arms, Olivia felt a sense of homecoming more profound than any she'd ever known. This man, this relationship, didn't require her to be smaller, physically or emotionally. For the first time in her life, she was loved not despite who she was, but because of it. The wedding took place in late summer, a simple ceremony in Thornfield's gardens with staff and close friends in attendance. Mrs. Reynolds made the journey from Evergreen Hill, her gruff exterior softening as she hugged Olivia fiercely. "Told you to build something worth remembering," she whispered. You've done that and more. Marta and Daniel handled the reception feast. Hannah managed the logistics, and Theo had spent weeks ensuring the grounds were perfect. The celebration lasted well into the evening, lanterns illuminating the garden paths as guests danced and toasted the couple who had created this magical place. When the last guests departed, Olivia and Alexander found themselves alone on the veranda, the stars brilliant above and the soft sounds of night creatures creating nature's symphony around them. "Happy?" Alexander asked softly, his arm around her waist. Olivia leaned into his embrace, considering the question seriously. Happiness had been such a conditional state in her past, always tentative, always threatened by the next cruel comment or dismissive glance. But now she realized happiness had transformed into something deeper and more resilient, into joy, into peace. "More than happy," she answered truthfully. "Content, like I've finally found where I belong." "With me?" Alexander's smile was evident in his voice. "With you," she agreed, turning to face him. "But also with myself. That's the part I never expected." He nodded, understanding, his fingers gently tracing the curve of her cheek. "The greatest gift isn't that I love you, Olivia. It's that you've learned to love yourself." In that moment, under the vast canopy of stars, Olivia recognized the truth of his words. The most profound transformation hadn't been Thornfield's resurrection from neglected mansion to beloved inn. It hadn't even been her relationship with Alexander, as precious as that was. The true miracle had been her own journey from shame to self-acceptance, from believing she needed to be smaller to embracing her right to take up space in the world. The morning after their wedding, Olivia rose early as always, drawn to the kitchen by habit and contentment rather than obligation. She mixed dough for sweet potato bread with practiced hands, humming softly in the pre-dawn quiet. When Alexander appeared in the doorway, sleep-rumpled and smiling, she felt the now familiar warmth bloom in her chest. "Making bread on your honeymoon morning?" he teased gently, crossing to press a kiss to her temple. "Some habits bring too much joy to break," she replied, continuing to knead the responsive dough beneath her hands. "Besides, this is where our story really began, with bread and tea and small kindnesses." Alexander's arms encircled her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder as he watched her work. "And where do you think our story goes from here?" Olivia smiled, leaning back into his embrace. The future stretched before them, full of possibilities neither could have imagined when they first met. A partnership built on mutual respect that had blossomed into enduring love, an inn that welcomed guests with genuine warmth, and perhaps someday, a family of their own to fill Thornfield's many rooms with laughter. "Wherever it goes," she answered, turning to face the man who had seen her true worth when others had not. "We'll write it together, one day at a time." Later that morning, as sunlight streamed through Thornfield's windows and the scent of freshly baked bread filled the air, guests would marvel at the special atmosphere that made this inn unique among luxury accommodations. Few would know that the magic they felt came from a simple truth. Thornfield had been restored by two people who had learned to see beyond surfaces to the value within, in an abandoned mansion, in each other, and ultimately, in themselves. And while guests came and went, taking memories of comfort and beauty with them, Olivia and Alexander remained, building their life together one day at a time. Their story, like the bread Olivia still baked each morning, continued to rise and transform, nourishing not only themselves but all who entered their world. For Olivia had discovered what many spend lifetimes seeking, that love, real, enduring love, doesn't ask us to be smaller or different or perfect. It simply creates space for us to become more fully ourselves. And in that becoming, we find not only acceptance but celebration of who we truly are.